Guys, it's a Monday here in the last week in October. Before we get into anything today, guys, first off, this is that point in the semester where things start to move really, really fast because we've got Halloween, and then before we know it, it's Thanksgiving, and before we know that, it's Christmas. So this month is going to be moving very, very quickly. A couple of the items that I want to cover, I'm going back to the syllabus this week and kind of prioritizing some content. There's no way, obviously, we'll get through this entire textbook by the time we're done with this semester. That being said, we're going to prioritize certain content. I'm also going to, for your sake and for mine, do something to help you get your test grades up. For anybody who was not happy with their first test score, we're going to do a couple of chapters as online chapters where you'll have an open book, open notes test to go along with those. I'm going to be deciding which ones those are going to be because I am very committed to our last assignment in this class being our collective bargaining exercise. So that we do need to get there, especially based on the fact that we've had so many things happening this semester, like the GM strike and everything else that have served as examples for us. It's my goal to get us there. But some reminders, guys. Right now, your Chapter 4 assignment, if you've not submitted it, it is overdue. It's due on Friday. I'm giving you a get-out-of-jail-free card to submit that by end of day today because I won't start grading these until tomorrow. And also, guys, if you went to Mentorship Day, which I hope you all did, remember to submit your photo. The submission link, I believe, is in Chapter 4. All you got to do is upload your selfie. If anybody went to the extra credit session, I have sign-ins for that, so I can verify whether or not you were there through the sign-in for the light bulb moments. But before we get into today, before we get into any other content, we want to do show of hands. Did anybody enjoy Mentorship Day? And if so, what did you enjoy? Yes.
I think it was good to hear people's perspectives that were in our seats not too long ago. But I also think it served as kind of like motivation. Motivation to kind of keep going and establishing things and working towards what's happening.
So it was a good dose of reality from people who were in these seats not too long ago. I love it. Anybody else have an experience at Mentorship that they enjoyed? Yes.
I loved making the connections with everybody because a lot of people from last year, we just picked up where we left off, and it was more of like a, not colleague to colleague, like board friend to friend type of atmosphere. So that was really fun.
That's awesome. Anybody else make a new friend or make a relationship with a mentor? Guys, by show of hands, how many of you got an email address or a LinkedIn swap from somebody you met on Friday? Awesome. And Corey, what field were you looking in? Any technology?
Yeah, I went to actually went to 3 sessions. I went to the Sheets one, I went to the DMV session, and I went to student athlete session.
You didn't have to meet Marcus Haynes when you were there, did you?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, Marcus and I used to work with him. And Marcus, I got to tell this story about him because he was a grad assistant back when I was working in the administration here. And Marcus went on to start his own Department of Defense contracting company. And his wife, Mish, she graduated the same year he was here. He was football, she was softball. She's like the number 2 person, more or less, in the IRS now. Like she answers to one of the directors of the IRS. And 2 of their friends went on to big things. One of them is a project manager. And I don't know, did anybody meet Belinda Gardner when she was here? Belinda works in hiring now for the NFL, and she used to run her own e-commerce company. These are all people who graduated the same year and knew each other. It's crazy how these connections come back around. If you made some connections, guys, I hope you're going to leverage them because it's good stuff, and it's good to be able to have those contacts and to leverage those in your life. Guys, a reminder: if you love Halloween, by the way, by show of hands here. I want to give this question in perfect context. Wait till I finish the question before you raise your hand or choose not to. Does anybody here believe in ghosts? And what I mean by that, they believe there is something legit to the phenomenon of ghosts. By show of hands. Anybody for sure does not believe in ghosts? Anybody here who doesn't know and hasn't raised their hand yet? That's okay too. This is going to be really cool. Tomorrow night, it's a St. Francis tradition. This guy, his name is Dr. Kirk Weichsel. He's a professor emeritus. This guy taught here for 45 years. Fantastic guy, great storyteller. He's going to be up in the Vista at 7 o'clock tomorrow night telling ghost stories, getting us in the spirit of Halloween. We're going to have free cookies and refreshments and stuff. If you know any freshmen who need CES credits to it, CES approved, I'll be there with my wife. We come every year. I'm very much looking forward to it. Guys, in the news, the GM strike is over. So we got to determine first, because the strike was officially over on the 25th. Elliot, you were our record keeper for this. What was the student pick?
On November 5th.
November 5th. And what was my pick?
Today.
I predicted today, huh? Wow. So that means if my pick was the winner, because I'm actually closer. I remember what you guys said you would want to do, and that is or you would be willing to give me a fully engaged class day. So here's the counter offer I'm going to make to you guys. If you guys on this very challenging day, because we're all tired today, give me a fully challenging day today, where you all act and speak with me and really respond, I'll still give you a day off class. Can you guys commit to that? Can you guys commit to that? Because if so, I'll be announcing, and get this, guys, I'm going to give you a day off on a Friday. Does that work for you guys? All right. I get to pick the Friday, and I'll be announcing it. But you guys are going to get a Friday off class in exchange for honoring your end of the bargain. Are we in agreement on this? Yeah. Excellent. All right, guys. Well, guys, let's start talking about this strike then. Guys, the strike was rumored to cost GM about $2 billion. That sounds like a lot, but I honestly thought it might be a little higher. I'm going to show you a little video about how the strike got resolved. Then we're going to talk about who won and why. We needed a week to review it. The very fact that this deal got approved with a 57% margin, what message is that sending about the deal? Yes?
There was still some conflict going on in the union as to whether that it was worthwhile.
Yeah, I would hardly call 57% a landslide. So this is, yes?
So basically, do they just vote on it, and if it gets 50% or higher, then it resolves it? Is how it works?
Generally, it's 51%. So we got a little over where we needed to get. But we're still not talking about something that people are saying this is not a landslide victory. They're saying that we're going to go with it, but we're not all that excited about it. And you may be asking yourself, why? Well, here's what they negotiated. They negotiated a 3% pay raise, 4% large sum increase, in alternating years. So this year you get a 3% pay increase. Next year you get a 4% lump sum. You get it all at one time on alternating years. For those of us working in industry, 3% is an okay cost of living adjustment. That's not a massive raise when it really comes down to it, but it is based on what you're making. GM's saying, for you guys accepting that, we're going to invest $3 billion into electric trucks, and we're going to create over 2,200 jobs over the next few years. Great, wonderful idea. Now here's where it gets interesting. You remember, of course, the United Auto Workers had an issue with temporary employees. They wanted them to have a path to full employment. And they basically said, GM said, we will allow a process for temps to get hired after 3 years, and they can reach their full potential pay in 4 years instead of 8. That's the way the system used to work. Check this out, guys. Temps for this company are making $30 an hour right now, and they raised that to $32 an hour. They kept their health care the way it is right now, so the health care didn't get changed. Check this out, guys. If you get a job with GM, if you're full-time, you get an $11,000 signing bonus. Dude, $11,000 for working in a factory and $4,500 if you're a temp. So if you come in to get a $30 to $32 an hour temp job, you get $4,500 up front. That's pretty good. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at. Now, the thing that the union wanted, though, they wanted to get the Lordstown plant back up and operating, and to bring some of the SUVs that are being built in Mexico back to the United States, and GM held on that one. They said, no, we're not doing that. Does anybody, by the way, know what SUVs they're building in Mexico? They brought back an old nameplate a few years ago. Well, the Tahoe is made in Mexico, and so is the Blazer. The Blazer, which is their hot SUV that is actually made in Mexico. Here's my question. Who won? Yes?
I don't necessarily think either of them really won. I don't think it seems like one party or the other
really benefited. I think it was kind of in the middle, like a compromise, because it seems like GM kind of moved towards what the industry and the union and just people in general kind of think they should have with the success they had. I think the union wanted more than this, but it was kind of like right in the middle. I don't necessarily think one person really won.
Yes.
Kind of going off that, do you think that a lot of the like workers just kind of like were like, yeah, whatever, because they were sick of like being on strike, or do you think they really thought it was that great of like an offer?
40 days is a long time to be without a paycheck. And here's something you guys can feel free to disagree or agree with me on. Generally speaking, people spend what they earn. Do you agree with that statement? And here's what I mean by that. Let's say you start out your first job out of college, and you guys are all smart people, you're going to do well. Let's say your first job out of college, you're making 45 or 50 or 60, somewhere in that range, under $100,000 a year. Anytime you move up, you get a raise, you get another 10 or 20,000 in your paycheck. What do you generally do with it? You spend it. You upgrade your lifestyle. So we'd like to say that, wow, these are people, a lot of them have high school diplomas, who are making $45 and $50 an hour, but they also bought big homes, and they put their kids in college, and they did all these things. And so 40 days without a paycheck or health care, that's a pretty good strain on a family. Would you agree? I think that in this, I think that there was an element of fatigue there. When I look at what this came out in the wash, I don't see it as a big change for either side, really. I think the biggest, actually, see if you guys can guess what I think the biggest deal is up here. For the employees. Let's try to see it from my perspective, either Corey or Elliot. What do you think?
Well, there was a lot of issue regarding healthcare, and nothing happened.
Yep. To me, that was the big win for the employees. Guys, think about this, for example, right now. Does anybody know, out of all of the United States GDP, out of our $20 trillion GDP, what percentage do we spend on healthcare in this country?
What, 25%?
It's not quite that high, but it's about 20. So we spend 1 out of every $5 in this country is spent on healthcare. And when you get people living longer and longer, that's a bigger concern to people than just about anything. I think if and I'm not speaking for the union here, I think this issue was probably even more important than the raises to those folks in terms of not having to contribute toward their health care. Here's the way it works, guys. When you get out, most of us live in the world of what we refer to as high deductible health care plans. Does anybody know how that works? If you don't, I'm going to explain it to you. Guys, I live on a high deductible health care plan, as do most people in the country at this point. If you got health care, it means you have to hit a certain threshold of expenses before major things are covered. So, for example, my deductible for my family is $4,500. So before I get $1 paid for a surgery that I need or a major procedure, $4,500 are coming out of my own pocket. That's very common for most people. Now I get certain basic things covered. Health exams are covered. My medicines, I have a prescription drug program. I can pay into my own health savings account to offset those costs, so I can reimburse myself, but I got to take the initiative. If you work for GM, you basically have a zero copay plan where you don't have to worry about that $4,500. In this day and age, that's what they refer to as a Cadillac plan. That's a big deal. And that's, if I had to say what the big win for the workers is, that's the big win. What do I think the big win is for GM here? Yes?
The amount of raise, because like you said, it's more of like a cost of living adjustment than an actual raise.
I think that's a big win for GM, but I think the biggest win for them is keeping their manufacturing in Mexico. I'm not saying that's good for people in this country. I'm saying if you want flexibility in the company, they have built it in, so if they want to start a new company or a new car or whatever, they can still go to Mexico and pay a lot less for that kind of labor. Any other last words before we move on, guys? Yes?
How do you think this stock's going to do now with this?
I think it's going to do well. I mean, they saw a surge on Friday. Here's something else. Have you guys ever heard the expression, you got to read the tea leaves? Have you ever heard that expression? You can predict the future? All right. There's something that really sticks out and this entire slab worth of content that's different than everything else. What is it? Do you know what it is, Sarah? Well, that's a big deal. Is there something else that sticks out? Yes.
The electric truck.
Here's the waiting game the GM is playing. Eventually, when we start automating more and more things, those wages and those raises are not going to be as big of an issue to them anyway. So as we see more automation in the next decade and we go to autonomous vehicles and that stuff is built by computer to be driven independently, we're going to be eliminating a lot of our labor anyway. So they're seeing the future here as well. So it's going to be a challenging world for us out there, guys. It's going to be challenging for all of us. Before we jump into the content for today, though, any other comments or questions before we jump in? Yes, sir.
I just had two questions on the previous slide.
Yeah.
When it comes to the signing bonus, what is that? Yeah, 1,000.
11,000.
If you get full time, is that like untaxed upfront money, or is that taxed? And then the second question will be, when it comes to temp workers, what classifies like on the job for 3 years?
On the job would mean from your hiring date to 3 calendar years. That would be when you've been on the job for 3 years. You can be eligible to apply for full time. Now, if you're a temp, according to the way this all worked out, you're still getting the $4,500 signing bonus in addition to your $30 an hour job. Not too shabby. Will somebody do the math on that for me, by the way? What's 30? Will somebody volunteer to be my mathematician? What's 30 times 40? So what's 1,200 times 52? $62,400 is not a bad starting salary for somebody who is a temp, who is also eligible for overtime, by the way. That's not too bad for a high school diploma. So, any other questions, guys? Awesome. Well, guys, one of the things we left off talking about is why people organize, for example. What are some of the challenges, without even worrying what's on this slide, guys? What are some of the challenges of getting white-collar professional people to organize into labor unions? Why is that so challenging? Yeah, Corey.
They may have like a negative impression of like how they view unions, because of maybe stories they've heard or just their personal views.
So they're associating with people like General Motors or people who maybe aren't like them. So negative connotations. Why else is it challenging? That's a great point. Why else is it challenging to get white-collar people to organize? What else? Yes?
From a type of labor standpoint, sometimes their jobs are more, or their pay is more based on their skill and that kind of thing, whereas in unskilled labor, it's more based on just your output, your production levels, whereas if you're a surgeon, you might get paid higher if you're really good. So
it's very difficult to quantify people who are in white-collar professions, although it does happen, and there are physicians' unions, for example. It's very difficult to quantify it. A lot of it is the things you guys just mentioned. What's our professional standards? Let me give you an example. I work down the same hallway as Professor Dunlap and Dr. Seidel, both of whom teach accounting. They're both CPAs. They're people with very different qualifications than I have. Even though we have the same position on paper that we are instructors, their jobs are far different than mine. For us to be able to come up with consistent standards to evaluate each other for our union, for example, would be very challenging. In the same way, it would be very challenging for an instructor of HR and MIS to compare my skill set to somebody who teaches in the physician assistant program. If you go into a corporation, it's very similar. Now, if we compare that to people who work on an assembly line, dare I say unskilled labor, even though those folks work very hard, there's a lot of consistency in the jobs that people do. So in terms of how that stuff is driven by policy and regulation, that's tough too. And in terms of how we make decisions on who's getting promoted and how within an organization, sometimes a collective bargaining agreement has a hard time covering those things. Now the counterpoint is plenty of people who teach are in unions. The National Education Association covers high school teachers. I bet there's a lot of negotiation that goes on at a national level to try to figure out these finer points because there is a lot of inconsistency. So there are a lot of folks who also, in the white-collar world, who view themselves as very employment mobile and also do not want to be beholden to a collective bargaining agreement. Now, for example, the AFL-CIO they have an institute where they actually will train you how to be a union organizer. So if you want to go learn how to start a union or to get a union involved in your workplace, the AFL will gladly provide that training for you. You can go do one of the 3-day workshops. You can go do a summer internship program. You can be an apprentice to somebody who already is in a union. That's one example. But plenty of these national unions will do that because they want to spread their dogma. They want to spread their idea of doing things. So in terms of the ways that unions get involved in organizing employees, there's a couple ways we can do it. If you're a union organizer, for example, you can choose to take a very hands-off approach. I'm going to wait and see if somebody comes to me. So let's say, for example, if I weren't treated well here at St. Francis, I could go to an education union and say, we really want to start a union at St. Francis University. I'm treated very well here, so I don't have any urge to do that. But if I did, that would be a start for me. I could actually take that action. A flip side might be if somebody who was in that union had heard that people at St. Francis aren't very happy, they might start knocking on doors of people, making phone calls. I might find a flyer on the windshield of my car talking about a particular union. They might reach out to me directly. So somebody who is trying to get people in a union, they can take one approach where they don't do anything at all and wait for the people to come to them. Another might be to call me up, email me, contact me, and let me know what's in it for me. So people who are union organizers, their number one job is to educate people on what their union actually does. Now keep in mind, unions are, in addition to representing people, what are unions as well? They're businesses too. So they also have people who have to market and tell people about the product. So we got a person who educates. Persuader means getting people to really consider trying to organize a union. And supporters, meaning people who are from the national or regional union will show up, for example, to bolster the existing employees who are trying to unionize. Let me give you an example. I've mentioned before that my wife is a member of SEIU because she's a registered nurse. When they went on strike several years ago at UPMC Altoona, people from the national union were there supporting them, literally doing things like bringing them coffee and donuts on the picket lines. It was cold. It was like -10 one of those days that those people were out marching with signs and they were feeding them coffee and donuts to keep them operating, for example. And oftentimes supporters will get fellow labor unions to show up at strikes or show up at organizing events to try to show support as well. So in terms of the ways that people have concerns versus strategies, some people, for example, may say to their employer, say to the union organizer, we don't have a good relationship. We don't have a good relationship between our employees and our company. And the union might come back and say, well, we can help you. The employees may say things, for example, that management is not answering us, they're not honoring their end of the deal, they're not honoring promises that they made to us. And the union is glad to come in and say, yes, we'll help you get those promises kept. But one of the biggest reasons really comes down to the idea that people believe that there is strength in numbers. And we made that analogy before. You remember the very first day of class, when I had you all come to the front of the room to confront me, I've got a lot of people to stare at the same time as opposed to a one-on-one negotiation. So people who believe, for example, that they have not been well represented and want to be collectively represented want a union to come in as well. Finally, there's also safety, guys, in terms of people who are in unsafe working environments. What's the best example you can think of areas we talked about where people unionize for a safety reason? What's the best example we can think of? Yes?
Mines.
The mines in this region, absolutely. And so a lot of those folks, I mean, whether we were talking about actually working in the mines or the employment conditions surrounding people at the company store, unionization and that part of things was all about actual personal safety. So that can be a part of it too. And so the unions themselves can essentially provide a mechanism for collective bargaining. They can provide a way for the employees to deal with the employer as a group. They can institute safety requirements. They can help out with negotiations. So that's really how the union sells itself to people who want to organize. So one of the other things we refer to, who here has ever heard the term rank and file? You know what it means? What's rank and file? It's an important term to be familiar with in the union setting. When we start talking about rank and file, what we're talking about are people who are kind of the people who do the main work of the organization. So it's not to slam leadership, but for example, in an organization like St. Francis, bless you, We've got the president, we've got the vice president for academic affairs, we've got the board of trustees, all these very important people. And then we've got the folks who do the work of the organization, the rank and file. That would be your instructors, that would be your coaches, that would be your custodians, that would be the people who make our food. Those are the rank and file of an organization. So, in terms of the rank and file intensive strategy, what that means is that unions don't go after leadership, they go after the rank and file. Why would unions not go after leadership in a company? Why would they not be encouraging leadership? Any ideas? It's a trick question. Why would they go after management? Oh. No, I bet you knew the answer. Can leaders in management be in unions generally anyway? No. And generally speaking, and there are exceptions to this rule, but is management ever saying to themselves, gosh, we can't wait till there's a union in here? Has that ever been said in America? Probably very seldom has that been said, unless there are managers who care about employees in unsafe situations. So as a result, you're going directly to the people. You're making house calls. You're inviting people to meetings. You're focusing on things in your promotions that are important to individuals. You're talking about things that affect them directly, whether it is the idea of their wages, their job security, any of those things. And the other thing is, too, guys, anytime you're trying to get people to buy in something, we're more likely to come in if our friends like the idea as well. Is that a fair statement? Yeah, so we're trying to convince people as a group. Now, guys, in your own words, because we're doing a participatory day today, what advantages, if a union is trying to organize, or people are trying to organize a union, I should say, what advantages does the company hold in this process? What does the company have in their back pocket? Sean, what advantages, if we have a group that's trying to form a union, what advantages does the company have? Emily?
Can they pay to have like their employees listen to like
You bet your bottom dollar they can. They can pay people to listen to their spiel. We got full access. So we have the idea basically of saying, hey, look, guys, sit down and listen to what we have to offer. A union cannot come in during work time and have the same level of access. We can also be able to say to folks, hey, guys, we'll make things better. We're going to make things better for you. And the bottom line is most people really are afraid anytime you start talking about change. If we say we're going to change the terms and conditions of your employment, even if it's positive, people fear change. I think generally speaking, people don't change unless they have to. Do you guys agree with that statement? Yeah, we change when we have to. And even if we don't like the situation we're currently in, has anybody ever heard the expression, the devil you know? What's that expression mean?
The idea is that you would rather deal with a problem that you've already encountered rather than deal with a new problem that you don't know how to deal with.
Exactly right. So even though I work for Ryan, he's kind of a hard ass. He's really hard on me all the time and criticizes everything I do work-wise. I know him. I don't know Todd. I've never worked for him. He could be even worse. Would you be worse than Ryan? Yeah. Think you'd be a harder boss than Ryan would? All right, I'm staying with Ryan. He at least gives me Sundays off. I got half a day off Sunday to walk my dog and clean my house. So there it is, guys. And the other part of it, too, if a company can delay the time in which an organizer shows up till we actually get to a vote, for example, about the union, there's less likelihood people are going to vote for change. Anytime you put things off, people tend to get, as the expression goes, they grow roots. They start putting roots down. They start fearing the change aspect of it. We've been going here for a few minutes, so I would like to stop for my first opportunity for a question or comment today. Sir?
With more moving toward electric cars and automation, what's one thing you wish you could keep from whether it's cars today or cars?
Oh, that's easy, man. I think that the biggest mistake we've made in the world is the elimination of the manual transmission. How many of you in this room can drive a stick? It is a rare thing. You cannot buy, in the United States in 2019, you cannot buy a manual transmission American-made pickup. Like, what the hell, man? Like, seriously, manuals are awesome. Like I have an old 2004 Dodge Dakota that's rusting to pieces that I will not get rid of because it's a manual, and it drives me crazy that I cannot buy a fun car in the United States for a reasonable price anymore. And do you have a manual as well? What do you drive? That car is not the same car with an automatic transmission. Ironically, the new dual clutch automatics are faster, but I don't care. It's not the same. You drive. Who everybody show of hands drives manuals again? What's different about driving a manual? Control. And what else is different?
I was just gonna say you feel powerful.
You do, man. That car is listening to everything you do. You corner differently in a manual. You accelerate into corners. It's like, I don't know. It's hard to explain to somebody who's never driven a manual how much different it is. Yeah.
Left foot something to do too.
Exactly.
Like, what's the thing? Like, in my little Subaru, I got a 4-cylinder boxer engine, but like any kind of road, I can beat an automatic car going any day. Just because an automatic, you can't just throw it in the second and then just zoom all the way around corners.
It's true. And in wintertime, they're wonderful because you can downshift and you have it. And I know that you have the manual-matic, it's not the same. You put it into third or second gear, and you're never going to wreck it. I have never left the road unintentionally in that Dodge ever because of that manual transmission. Yes.
When you get your driver's license here, do you drive an automatic car?
You can drive an automatic.
Is it like a rule?
Nope. You don't have to know how to drive a manual.
And so the way when you get your driver's license, you have to they give you a manual, so you have to learn.
The same manual.
You haven't lived until you've been on like a 45-degree hill pulling out of a stop sign with a manual transmission. You haven't lived until you've been in that movie. And here's the other thing. My Dodge has 160,000 miles on it, original clutch. So that thing is, rock on. Anybody else have a question? Yes?
You can change like the place of the car whenever it's too old. The government give you like anything?
In the state of Pennsylvania, once you hit 25 years, you can have it licensed as a classic car. You pay a lower license and you pay a lower registration, but you have to keep it under so many miles a year. If it's still a daily driver, you can't license it as a classic.
But if it's still under that mileage and after 20 years, you only like award or anything you get.
Yeah, you basically that's pretty much your options to license it as a classic. It doesn't matter how many miles it has on when you license it as a classic. After that, you can't continue to put the miles on. So you've got to keep it limited to, I think it's 10,000 miles a year. Yeah. It doesn't work for me though. I'm a 30,000 mile a year driver, so that would not work for me. But good question. All right, let's continue, guys. Thank you for those questions. I'll always talk about cars because I love them, and I think we're going to lose something when people don't drive anymore. So, guys, in terms of what works out well for a company, as you guys remember from the movie American Factory, what are some tactics that the company itself chose to try to keep the union out? What did they choose to do? Yes?
They brought in anti-union consultants.
There's a whole market of people who are, some are lawyers, some are not, just come in basically to try to help a company keep from having a union. And how can we do that? Let's say all of you guys decided, Tompkins class, we're forming our own union. And I decided to come in and try to counteract your choice of forming a union. What are things I can do to try to keep you guys? Yes? I could say that again? Yeah, we can give you respect, we can give you raises, we can do all those things. I can make it better for you. What else could I do? I'm sorry? I could use fear for sure. Like, give me an example.
If you guys do this, you guys will all get S.
And that's true. And now if I overtly say that, that's an unfair labor practice. But could I start rumors? Yeah, I absolutely could get rumors started. Hey, well, we've been hearing that these other plants are going to close. I can come in and say, hey, look, guys, I'm really sorry for the first half of the semester. Give me a second chance. We'll make it up for you if you don't form this union. So those are things we can do as well. Now, some of the things that don't work as well, you can try to push back an election, and it will work under certain circumstances, but ultimately, if you start overtly trying to keep people from voting on a union, that starts becoming unfair labor practices. You're actively trying to derail that idea. Some people, for example, start putting jobs to other plants. That can be ineffective too, because you're also getting into the potential of unfair labor practices. And the other thing too, if you're trying to find out who your union sympathizers are by asking them, that's not very effective for a couple of reasons. What might be one reason it's not effective to weed out union organizers, other than the fact it's illegal? Yes?
Hey, do you like unions? No.
That's exactly right. If people know that you're trying to weed somebody out, are they going to tell you the truth? No. I mean, if you get into things like personality profiling and everything else, you're spending an awful lot of money. So, guys, in terms of the employers, for example, the employers do have the idea they can choose the date for the election. If you want to vote on union, we can do that. It's going to be on this date. You can also, for example, when I say influencing the composition of the unit, what we're talking about here, let's say, for example, I taught several sections of this class, and several of you started forming a union. I can start putting more people in the other sections. I can start transferring people to other sections so there's fewer people here potentially to vote. And that technically is not a fair labor practice. It all depends if there's a business necessity for it. Now, some of the things that you can't do. You can't make people stay around off the clock to give them a speech. You can pay them during the workday. You can pay them overtime. But if you're saying you have to stay and listen to me and I'm not paying you for it, you're breaking the law by doing so. If you fire somebody because they're an activist with no other reason that you're firing them because they're an activist, that's illegal. Now, can employers generally come up with other reasons? Yeah, especially in right-to-work states. And you also, even though companies do it all the time, we're talking about the stuff that's illegal, companies do it all the time. If you're threatening people, if you form a union, you're all going to lose your jobs. You are into unfair labor practices up to your eyeballs. So those are things you cannot do, for example. Now, it sounds unusual, but it happens. Let's say, for example, everybody decides they want to form a union. You don't even necessarily have to bring in the National Labor Relations Board. Yes?
So when the CEO of that company in the movie said, when or if we have a union, I'll have to shut the company down at this plant, is that illegal or is that just saying
Totally
business?
It's totally illegal. He did it right on film. Why might he have done that, Elliot?
Right on film?
Yeah.
I don't think he didn't seem to understand American business law that well. But also, isn't there something about if your company's origins is in a different country, there's some laws that might not affect you, being that it's just a subsidy?
I can't think of a law. If we operated under those circumstances, you could also get away with paying Americans Chinese wages, too. So, no, if you have a company here, you're subject to the labor law in the state that you're in. And I think it was exactly what you said earlier, and that was this guy did not realize what the hell he was saying when he's saying on camera, if you guys unionize, we're out of here. This was the same guy who also had a problem where they were locating the smoke alarms, too, because he didn't understand that idea of OSHA regulations either. So, but believe it or not, guys, if you form a union and the company's like, okay, we get it, you can have your union, you can do your own union or organizing. The company can basically say, we believe you, we see your cards, we see the election, we recognize you as a collective bargaining union. And the employer, what they refer to is they refer to a card check. And that means everybody fills out a card, whether or not they want to be a member of the union. And if you get over half, if 51% say basically, yeah, we want a union, you got a union. Now what you can also do, if you want to question that, you can bring in the National Labor Relations Board to either facilitate the election or at least check on the documentation. Most employers are not going to voluntarily just accept a union. Why is that? Why would most employers still want some sort of verification? Sarah? Oh, I'm sorry. Does anybody know? Why would an employer not choose to just voluntarily accept an election? Why would they always want to challenge it?
Bringing a union is like someone else telling them how to run their business?
Nobody, you're hardly ever going to find a company that's going to just voluntarily accept it. I will say with the one exception I can think of is Volkswagen. Volkswagen in their American plants, several times the non-auto workers have attempted to unionize. And Volkswagen was actually pretty open to the idea. They weren't against it at all. Why is that? Yes?
Is it because I was looking at something recently, I was curious, and in a lot of European countries, the union membership and support is very high in the labor force. And sometimes, I think a couple of countries might be in the 90% membership.
Quite right.
So they're probably just used to working with that back like where they're from.
Volkswagen isn't intimidated by unions because most of their plants in Germany are probably union plants. And so to them, they may have even done a voluntary recognition, but ultimately the workers in these states, by the way, most of the states that Volkswagen operates in the United States are where? Yeah, so they're in places that have anti-union sentiment anyway. So if you want to organize a union, though, ways that you can have some success. For example, if you're a company, if you want to cooperate and you want to say, well, we're going to be a union plant, we'll be cooperative with these people who want to organize. You can sign what we refer to as a neutrality agreement, which means if I'm a car company, I could sign an agreement with the United Auto Workers saying I'm going to play fair. If you guys want to organize, we're going to play fair with you. I'll even give you a list of my employees if you want to contact them. And you can also agree, if you go in with some sort of kind of collaborative spirit, that we're going to put a collaborative timeline together in which we are going to organize. Now, this is a little difficult to read, but I'm going to try to, actually, let's make this a little bigger for you guys, just to make that a little easier to see. Thought that would look a little better on the screen. We'll try to make that a little bigger. All right. So guys, walk along with me here. The way the whole process would work, we've got, is there interest in the first place? And interest could come from somebody, for example, inside the company who's basically saying, we want you to come in, labor union, we want you to help us organize. Or it could be external. Somebody from a union heard that there was rumblings inside the company, so they come and start knocking on doors of employees. The ways that we can gain recognition if we're a labor union. We can do what we refer to as voluntary recognition. The statement I just made, that the company, after a showing of interest, says, okay, you guys have your union, we will recognize you, great. The second would be what we refer to as the NLRB doctrine, and that means, for example, we have a lot of folks who want a union, but they've been so repressed by the company has tried to oppose unionization to the point where the NLRB has to come in and actually supervise the election. That's also known as the Giselle doctrine, G-I-S-S-E-L. And then we also have the secret ballot election, which that also means the NLRB can come in and hold a secret ballot election. You can do a couple of different ways. We're going to cover this all again on Wednesday anyway. I'm just giving you the basic kind of lowdown. After you have an election, we can choose what kind of election we're going to have. We're going to have what we refer to as a consent election or a contested election. A consent election means that people are giving their consent to be a member of a labor union. A contested election means that people are contesting the fact that they didn't get actually a fair chance to organize in the first place. We're going to walk through this as a whole part of our exercise on Wednesday, but the takeaway from this slide goes as follows. Interest can come internally or externally. The union can be recognized either voluntarily by the company's standpoint, through the Giselle doctrine, or through a secret ballot election. Giselle doctrine is used when you have unfair labor practices and people have not been able to fairly organize. The process of the secret ballot election we're going to walk through again on Wednesday as well. So, guys, I think that where we're at this point, because we need to spend some time on that doctrine, and we're at about 4 minutes till anyway, we're going to end it right there for today. I'll be announcing what day we will be canceling class in the next class or so. If you did not submit your assignment, remember that assignment was due on Friday, Chapter 4. Yeah, it's at the end of the day today. Don't forget to submit your mentorship day pictures too. Have a good day, guys.